Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss pre-market video for Thursday, October 4th, 2018. I am Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. We've been trending higher here in the current market. Obviously, we do have a very narrow pivot range for this month, and price continues to hold above the pivot range, even testing into it here in pre-market trading this morning, getting as low as 29.13 quarter and then bouncing back up to current levels, which is 19.5 last trade. So currently doing what needs to be done in order to remain bullish. However, we haven't really gone anywhere just yet. I mean, this is the beginning of October, and we're only just barely sitting here at these highs. We haven't really gone much any direction except for sideways. And sometimes when that happens, you could see more of a range develop before you see a breakout. You could need to sometimes take out a low before you can springboard higher, or perhaps take out a high before you can drop lower. So again, right now with a very narrow range, keeping an eye on things, because this is the point in the chart where something significant could happen again. It's what I mentioned time and time again. We're up here above the 28.78 half, and this is the major high from earlier in the year. And if there's any failure to hold this zone overall, there could be a pretty big drop coming. Or at the same time, any retest of that zone that is defended, again, could lead to a major continuation higher. So we're not done with a big potential move coming. I mean, there's more action to be seen, but the question is, how much more of a pullback do we get? So right now, there's a lot of great pullbacks happening in the market for some great buying opportunities. Some markets are still dropping much more. So again, we've got to see how much the index actually moves. And right now, still pointing higher, still looking to defend pullbacks, and still looking for a continuation into the end of the month that could take us 29.65 or likely even a little higher. So we'll continue to watch this as it develops. The NQ, you'll see here the NQ has pulled back. Again, this one has held the 7,700 level. That's the level we've been watching here. A rejection on the first trading day of the month. Modest rejection again on the days 2 and 3. Now we're getting a downside push at the moment. And again, while that could lead to some weakness here that we're currently seeing, and we're also seeing a rejection of the 7630.75 FOMC key level from September 26 from below right now on the intraday chart. That could lead to some more downside and more of a stop run to the downside. But again, remember, the trend is up. The pivot range, even as low as this midpoint, still remains a buying opportunity for a late month rally that could take us as high as 78.34, or perhaps as shallow as just the 77.50s. But again, we could see more upside on the longer term or medium term chart. Right now, how much more downside do we get? I suppose getting back above 76.30 would open up more upside, but right now staying below it could open up more price discovery on the day time frame. All right, taking a look now at crude oil. You'll notice crude oil has been significantly bullish again. The 60-minute chart showing lots of activity 3 days out of the last 4, which preceded these major rallies. Yesterday had some major highs and lows, big swings. Right now holding above 76 for the first time in quite a while. We could scroll back in this chart and it would take quite a while to see the last time that price was above 76s. So this is a big time zone up here to hold. The last time we were above it was back in 2014s here on this long-term chart. So again, we'll see how does price respond here to prices above 76s. Do we continue to power higher, or does price start to show some sort of rejection? Again, remember, we know that this is the key range high, and above that high is where things can happen, and then a failure can happen, which could lead to some sort of pullback, maybe just to the 25% level, maybe to the 50% level in the middle of the range. Who knows how far it'll go, but any failure to hold that zone opens up that potential. So if this thing cannot continue to hold above 76s, it could be an early indication right now of a broader pullback. For now, this market remains extremely bullish, so it's not the best opportunity to sell it or short it at this moment. Continue to ride the current direction, but be watching for signs that maybe is getting a little bit overdone in the near term. Let's take a look at gold. Gold continues to compress again. This one is just kind of a waiting game. 1220, 1180. Until then, it's going to get choppy. It's going to continue to give everybody false starts. This was a great trap and return back up. But as I noted before, we continue to see lower highs again, and we continue to see just a downward trend. And really, we haven't gotten outside of 1220. That's the level we could never get beyond initially. And so the very first day that we had this rejection, I mentioned that we easily get back to this midpoint, and we might get as high as the return point at 1220. But I don't even see it getting to 1240 or beyond for much longer. It could continue to hold. And really, that's been the ceiling. And so again, until we see a forceful breakout through that level, we're still holding. And until we see a forceful breakdown through 1180, we're still in the range. So again, this is just a back and forth range, perhaps just trading around that 1200, 1205 zone. Eventually a move is coming, but right now it's still building that energy. So avoid the chop and wait for an eventual breakout. Lastly, let's take a look here at RTY. What you'll notice with RTY right now is it's sitting right at major support, 1660 here. This one has not participated in the rally that we've seen recently in, all across the markets, from the ES to NQ to crude oil to, it doesn't matter. This is one of the asset classes that has not performed well because everything else perhaps has overperformed. And now you're going to start to see some sector rotation perhaps. And you're seeing at this LVN here a little bit of strength coming in. You see a hard bottom a couple of days ago, a strong reversal yesterday, and today inside day and holding. It reminds me something like this pattern back here, where it's kind of holding, developing, and some support in that zone before we see some sort of bounce. The next bounce, I wouldn't necessarily take it to a new high, but I do think the recent key range high is doable. That's 1720. Or at least a retest of the September 26 FOMC key level, the pivot range, the previous close, right? So I think 1660 could bounce us back toward, say, 1710 to 1720. So it could be a pretty significant short-term bounce coming. Again, this right here is a very good short-term level. We haven't seen the market take out a real pivot low here, except for here recently. The better LVN is down here at 1620, so even if the market were to drop here, this would be an even better buying opportunity. But again, we really haven't broken trend like that in a while. So again, this is a good spot here to watch for signs of strength where we may begin to see some upward price discovery in the small caps. Let's take a look at Bitcoin. One last chart. Bitcoin here. What you'll see with Bitcoin is, again, it continues to hold right at this above the 6,000 level. You see the lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. You see it's compressed significantly. You see value is right here. I mentioned that if it was any time where this was going to bounce, this makes the most sense because value has shifted lower, and perhaps if price can take it bid, there could be a significant bounce. However, we have not seen value go bid this entire chart. Every time there's been value, it's been offered. All the way down, you can see the HVN's getting lower, bigger and lower, bigger and lower, bigger and lower. And so it has continued to go down. Additionally, I've been asked the question, how often does a descending wedge break to the downside? I mentioned before that high odds that this thing breaks to the downside because of the descending nature. On the upside, it's the same thing. If it's an ascending type of pattern, high odds it breaks to the upside. That's just what happens. It's just the nature of the market participants and how they've built positions in that zone and what usually happens. Now, if I had to put a percentage on it, again, it's probably different for every scenario, but just generally speaking, I would go with 2/3 of the time it breaks in that direction, right? If you go with the value area of 68 or 70% of most occurrences happening within a certain probability distribution, I would say this is the same thing. 68, 70% of the time, it's going to break in the direction of the ascending or descending pattern. So again, I think this has high odds to still break to the downside, but if it were to break up and start to surpass one of these pivot highs, especially this one, it could be significant. It could be one of those really big events. But again, this one's been so beaten up, the bounces have not been much at all to speak of. When you see a market like this, typically it needs a flush. And when that happens, it comes fast and furious, and usually you see a big time push to new lows very, very quickly. So again, keep an eye on this one. Be careful and cautious if you are long. All right, that is it for now. Let's see how this plays out heading into the rest of the session. Good luck and trade well.